All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, we're going to start with some Caitlin Clark talk as we teased last time because I've made some controversial posts on some people's Facebook stuff. They loved it, but they have to kind of distance themselves from it as more public figures than I am. But so we're going to talk about that. We wanted to do some environmental stuff after that, and that ties into another thing we teased, which is the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951,
Which is
which
probably going to be a
I,
two-parter.
yeah, which is probably
Yeah,
going to be a
because
two-parter, but it does tie into the environmental thing really big, and it's something I didn't know about till I heard Andrew Bet David talking about it uh, on an in on he was being interviewed instead of interviewing. He was being interviewed by the Trigger guys,
okay.
uh, and uh, and he said just look it up, and so I looked it up, and I was like, "Oh, this is bad, you know."
And like a lot of those things that are already not good, then you look up how it's been used, and you're like,
Mhm.
you took a bad thing and you made it worse, and you're not even following the bad law. You're just doing what you want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that. Uh, before we got on, you were talking about just a little side note, the human side of everything. You were talking about working out in your garage because you haven't installed the AC or insulation
Yeah.
yet. And
I've got
for
the
those that live
insulation, so
in,
it's not as bad as it
uh,
could be, but I still haven't put an AC unit in there.
yeah, and but for those that know us from our Texas audience, Texas is still just preheating, but it's pretty bad. And in fact,
Yeah.
it's mostly bad this year because we have the weather being sucked in instead of blown out like last year. So it's
Hmm.
all we were 85, I think 89% humidity yesterday.
Yes, I'm getting really tired of walking out my door and thinking, why is it Houston? And yet I can't drive down to the coast and get bitten by a shark because otherwise, what's the freaking point of this weather?
Yeah, so it's uh I had an AC issue yesterday, and we always talk about different minds and stuff. And the inverse Polish notation really came out. The redneck engineering came through because I had a really busy work morning, and it just felt like I was sweating a lot. I was soaked by the end of working with my athletes because we did a lot of hurdle work and stuff, which I had to demonstrate because it was their first time doing it. So I was soaked. Everybody was soaked, and I'm like, God, it's just hotter than normal in here. Just to preface, the AC that's connected to my garage setup is from the upstairs AC, and so we're going, and it's like, okay, so that's done. You know what? This is going to be the first workout I've done since the surgery, and so I went through that workout, about 50 minutes of pretty decently intense high rep stuff. Got through that, and I was soaked, and I'm like, okay, that was still a great workout. Gonna go take a shower and have some lunch. So I walk into the main part of the house, felt cool downstairs. Walk up about three-quarters of the way up the staircase. It was like a layer of heat just sitting over there. I was like, what the hell? Walk up to the first vent, put my hand up to it. It's blowing hot air out. I was like, oh God, the AC's out again. So troubleshooting, figuring it out. The fan was working on the compressor, so I went and checked the coils, which I went up in the attic for that. You talked about sweltering attics. I soaked in probably the 20-30 minutes it took me to take it apart and look at the coils and make sure they were clean. I soaked through two beach towels of just pure sweat in that time. And so that's if anybody wants to borrow a sauna, you can come over and use my attic. It was so bad. And then finally I was like, okay, I got to quit now because I got more clients coming up. So I took a shower and dried off the best I could in that heat and worked with them, and it was getting warmer and warmer and warmer in the garage. And the last one we were talking about it, and something about replacing parts, and I was talking about me aging, and I'm starting to match the replacement rate of the house because the last time we replaced the pool pump was when I broke my titty, and so it was like costs going with the medical costs, and this time I had my behind issues, and all of a sudden the AC goes out again. So I'm kind of my our menses are in sync with me in the house right now, and after he left, I went out. looked at some more things, and I finally found it, the capacitor, not the one that runs the fan. That's why I didn't look that way first, because the fan was running. But there's a second capacitor that runs the coolant, the the condenser, the thing that sucks the freon through and puts it in the coils. And I look at it, and the terminal had exploded on it.
Oh,
And
geez.
it not only did it was the condenser out, or the capacitor out, but all the connectors, the wire connectors that go into it, which are specialty to the AC unit and the capacitor. Well, in Texas, you can't buy those things at your local Home Depot, Lowe's, or electric store, because capacitors could hurt you. So they're not allowed to sell them. So you have to order it online from another state. And
I
so,
can buy a bandsaw there, and that can hurt me a hell of a lot more
yeah, or
and
you
a
could
hell of
buy
a lot
roofing
easier.
materials, and I could fall off the roof a lot more than,
Chainsaw.
yeah.
Jeez.
Do not stop with
That's
genitals. It's in the warnings on the chainsaw. But the so I ordered it, and the best I could do was tonight the parts I needed would come in, and then it just popped in my head, pool pump. It's sitting on the ground next to me. The one from last year that I forgot to throw away when we had the bulk pickup. I just started taking it apart, and I'm like, hey, it's got a capacitor in it and all these wires. But the wire that goes into the capacitor was right, but the wire that went into the pool pump was wrong. So I Frankensteined it all together to use the internal units from the AC unit with the external units to the capacitor that I had new. And it was too small for the bracket. So I put a clothespin in there and then screwed it in so it stuck. And the AC works. And that was glorious, because 89 degrees upstairs was not going to be fun to try to sleep in. 89 and 80% humidity. And
ugh.
well, you also got to think about, as a homeowner, the mold,
Yeah. Oh
the
yeah.
mold that can start growing. So
And it could grow fast in those kind of situations.
yeah, so a little bit of redneck engineering, and uh, the slight hoarder tendency to not throwing anything away, because this just reinforced it again, which I
Hmm.
every other year, something I do that's a project that needed that thing I didn't throw away reinforces the fact that I don't throw things away. And the HOA hates me because there's little piles of wood in my backyard and stuff. But yeah,
Oh yeah.
that was my AC experience. And but it was just like, the client that was in the last one, I sent him what I did, and he sent me back a YouTube of Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, and the song was my grandpa was a carpenter, and it's all about, we do things ourselves, we don't hire it out, and we figure it out. And I was like, hey, my grandpa was a carpenter.
You know, I thought of this. I should have pulled up a clip of it, but for anyone who wants a fun listen, go Mike Rowe's podcast from at least a year ago. He had on Tim Allen. Um, and they were talking about Mike Rowe had done a guest spot on Tim Allen's show Last Man Standing, playing Tim Allen's brother. And they were laughing about getting in trouble because they missed their first entrance cue. They were all set up for the shot and everything, and they missed their entrance because they had gotten sidetracked talking about a toaster. Because Tim Allen was ranting about how he hates our disposable culture. And he had this toaster that broke. And yes, he's Tim freaking Allen. He's not hard up for money, but he's still, one of the reasons he's not hard up for money is he hates our disposable culture. And he was tinkering around with it, trying to get it to work, and he couldn't figure it out. And so he brought it in to work with him, because I think it was one of the electrical guys was a really good handyman that was kind of you know, did a little bit of everything on the set and had a similar kind of attitude. So he took it into work to get this electrical guy, hey, can you help me figure this out here so they could fix this toaster? And so he got to telling Mike Rowe about this. And then they got so engrossed in this conversation about how he fixed his toaster that they missed their cue.
Yeah. Didn't wasn't Tim Allen the one that was working at Home Depot when he got his big break?
Might have been, or something like that. Yeah. Like some kind of hardware store.
Because I think
That
Harrison Ford was the one that was the carpenter on set. So he was working on
yes,
the set. Yeah.
he hadn't completely given up on acting, but he had just about given up on acting and had said this isn't going to work, so I'm going to do production stuff. because he was a handyman. He had done work like that before, and he was working as a carpenter, working on the sets, and they needed an extra because when Lucas did the casting for the main three characters, he brought in the actors to read together. None of the potential actors for Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, or Princess Leia auditioned independently. They were always in a group of three, and they were short a Han. So Harrison, can you come over here and read for this? Because he knew he had some acting background. He said, "Oh, well, let's just have you do it."
Worked out well.
Worked
All right.
out pretty well.
On to the subjects of the day. Caitlin Clark.
Oh, yeah, no more procrastinating about this crap. Oh, geez.
Yeah. So the gist of the post from one of my former professional athletes who has a large audience, he was talking about the the WNBA and how they can't quit crying, and they always talk about grow the game, and then now someone comes in and it grows the game, and they're complaining about this person and hating on her and everything. And my comment, I guess I'll just read my comment directly. Let me. Okay, so everybody's talking about, oh yeah, whining players, they can't handle the spotlight, blah blah blah. And my comment was different take. It's not about the total spotlight.
Mhm.
They want the spotlight on the NBA. This is a real-time validation of evolutionary psychology and the difference between males and females, and a thought on why that translate to the success of the sport as a whole, what might be holding it back. Men celebrate the superstar. We create hierarchies within the team, putting forward the team captain. The worst thing you can do in women's groups is stand out. Oh, they can stand out when it's competing against a man, but not in women's only spaces. WNBA in parentheses. What we are witnessing in real time is the real time enforcement of the unwritten rule paired with the facts that fans love superstars. So my take on that is not only are we seeing something that the EP people have been talking about for a long time in the differences between males and females, but also we might be witnessing why that might be a major reason women's sports don't take off like men's sports do. It might not be the skill level difference. People like to share those videos of all these people missing shots, but if you really take a full season of NBA games, you can make a
Mhm.
montage video exactly the same, right? So it might be the fact that they haven't embraced the fact that people love stories, people love superstars, they love underdogs, they love all of these things. Well, if nobody stands out, is there a such thing as an underdog? Because you're all equal. There's no underdog if you're all equal. There's no person to sell jerseys if you're all equal. There's no person to bring people to the
Mhm.
street to the seats if you're all equal. So that was my take on it, and I don't know how people took it because there's no downvote in on Facebook, but it's yeah.
Well, and I can't remember if we said this while we were still recording or not last time, but the idea that, oh, people are just rooting for Caitlin Clark because she's white. Okay, right. And that's why white suburban kids were singing I want to be like Mike and, making Space Jam a hit movie. Shut up. It was because he was freaking phenomenal. Tiger Woods. I brought this up a couple weeks ago about the joke in the late 90s, early 2000s that was a joke that wasn't a joke, which is we live in a strange world where the biggest rapper in the world is white and the biggest golfer is black.
Mm-hmm.
Tiger Woods brought more eyeballs to golf than has ever been brought. And the media tried to make a lot of hay about because he's black. He never really did. He kind of did later on, but he never really did. It was about the fact that this guy is ludicrously good, and even if you don't know the game of golf, you can watch him next to everybody else and go, "Holy crap, that guy's a lot better." Even
Well,
if you don't know the game.
here's an example that takes the race issue out of it because it was considered the norm, but it still was superstar power. Who watched track and field before Carl Lewis and FloJo?
Mhm.
So now you've got male, female, both black, both in a predominantly African American centered sport for America, for the United States anyways, and nobody watched track and field. So you had these two personalities that the media put in front of us
And
because they
yeah,
wanted to promote Olympic track and field. Yeah, the media was part of it. The fact that they had personality was part of it. And the fact that they were freaking good was
they
part
were
of it.
they were breaking records, and it wasn't for anyone who isn't old enough to remember that what Carl Lewis was doing was it wasn't as dominant as Usain Bolt, but his wins in the 100 and in the long jump were every bit as dominant. He didn't dominate for as long and as too great a degree, but his wins in those Olympics they weren't really even close. And he's wearing the stars and stripes, competing against the Soviet Union in its last gasps. I mean, it's just everything aligned for that, and people went nuts for it. Um, you know, Serena and Venus, they were huge. Yeah, there was a story there about these girls that came, you know, uh, from the not typical background of your tennis stars. They were also just dominating everybody. In their heyday, you know, tennis now, the biggest stars, even in the US aren't Americans. We usually like to root for the American. I mean, how many memes have you seen the last week about, we know absolutely nothing about cricket, but then we win the quick cricket World Cup, which I didn't even know was here in DFW, and it's USA, USA, yeah. But the two biggest male tennis stars are Nadal and Jokic, and have been for
Well,
over a
And
decade.
Federer just recently too, even though
And
he
Federer, who's just, I don't remember if he's officially retired or not, but because they're so dominant, people who like sports like to watch greatness, for the same reason that they participate in the sport. Even if, the who was it who said golf is a what's the quote? Uh, Golf is a good walk ruined. Um, but people still do it because when you get that one shot that's perfect, you're like, yes. Well,
so when I went back to school, golf was on the list of things I could do with my time and money because we're doing okay, and I started this. This was part of what I would do with my time, but then I was like, okay, I could either pick up a hobby or I could be just a more complete human being, which actually interests me a lot. And I listen to people talk about it all the time because I train people that can afford me, which also means they can afford to play golf. And they're talking about tee fees and memberships and all of the how much the clubs cost. And I'm like, I am spending less to go to school in a university with all of these fees than you
mm-hmm,
spend on golf.
mm-hmm,
And so if I'm going to spend all that money and time just to hate myself most of the time, I'm going to spend all that time and money on something that's going to make me feel good about myself, which is having more knowledge and being a
well,
more robust human being other than throwing clubs. And, I hit some golf balls every once in a while because I got a net and a hand-me-down set of clubs, and I'm not very good. And it does get frustrating
mm-hmm.
just hitting into the net. I couldn't imagine trying to get it to the little bitty hole 400 yards away.
You remember the cartoon it was like the late 80s or early 90s, I think it was, where like it was like a superhero group, and I don't even remember like what their powers were or what any of it. I just remember that it was like Bo Jackson, Wayne Gretzky, Jordan, and somebody else. I think I don't remember who, but it was like a kind of a cross between Super Friends and Scooby Doo with these like four superstar athletes, and that's the kind of stuff that would make you go, yeah, as a kid, because Bo knows. All right. I don't know how to play hockey. I've never watched hockey, but I know that Wayne Gretzky is freaking better than anyone else, and it's not even close. I same with Jordan in basketball. I'm not a basketball player. I don't really watch the game that much, but just on the eyeball test, you could look at Jordan and what he did and go, "Oh, wow, that guy's good."
Hmm. Well, I'm going to bring up another guy, Braun here in a second, because back to Caitlin, the difference between men and women's sports. This is why I think it's at the structural level, because we have our superstars, Braun
Mhm.
being one of them. And this, and I'm not going to share what sound because I don't want to get copyrighted on anything. This is what we get with our superstars in men's sports. We're going to rewind here. Whoop, he just dunked it. Okay, watch when he gets the ball. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 steps and then dunk. We get the rules in their favor and the refs in their favor and the league in their favor. This is what we get with Caitlin. We get the rules and the refs, no foul called. That was an elbow to the face, not a block.
Yeah.
No foul called, and that is going on all year long with her. So that's why I think it is at the institutional structural level. It's embarrassing. People are like, oh, we got Braun. You talked about Jordan, and that's why I wanted to talk about LeBron because he's now the official scoring leader of all time. Never mind that he played several more years than Jordan, but there's and we celebrate him, and he's doing it in the setting of being able to skirt the rules in his favor. Caitlin Clark, if these stats are correct by a certain source I have online, top 15 in scoring in the WNBA, top 5 in assists, top 5 in threes, made top 25 in rebounding in the league. This is in the total league, not rookies.
Mhm.
Higher overall field goal percentage than the number 1, number 2, number 6, and number 7 and number 10 scores. She's doing that in the face of that, that would have been towards her stats had she not gotten elbow in the face because that was an easy
Mhm.
layup, right?
Mhm.
It's this is the difference. She's doing all of this despite the cattiness that is the WNBA versus the let's push these people forward. And every once in a while, a dissenting voice is like, but look what he did. He stepped 5 times before he. I saw one Braun video where he got the ball almost at the opposing 3-point line and he never dribbled. He ran to the basket and dunked it. And I'm like, that was like 8 steps and it counted. What the hell, dude?
I mentioned this before that when we were talking racial stuff, because about lawman Bass Reeves, and this came up that in some ways the CRT DEI people are right that there are systemic problems. It's just not the system they say it is. But this is one of those instances. All right, you have an ingrained culture. I want to say that the WNBA is 27 years old, is what I heard this year. It's almost 30 years old. It has never turned a profit. The only reason the WNBA exists and the XFL
Because
tried
they're
twice.
subsidized. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
subsidized.
the XFL tried twice and failed, and they only exist now because they had another league to merge with and try and keep things going. And they weren't the first one. I can't remember uh
Well, there
what
was the Euro League, but that was NFL subsidized,
EuroLeague was NFL
which I think they
subsidized.
should bring back. I hate this push to do everything in London and stuff
Mm-hmm.
with the NFL. Just bring back the Euro League
Who, who,
there and market it better because I loved the Euro League.
yeah. Who was it? What was the league that Herschel Walker went to for like a year or two before it went under? And then,
Ooh, I don't know.
yeah. So there was a league then in the 80s. There was something in the 90s. I remember that I can't remember. I think that was was that the World League, the San Antonio Riders? We went to a couple of their games.
Well, I'll look it up
Um,
real quick while you're talking.
so the point being, people have tried to make competing leagues with the NFL a half dozen or more times, and they don't succeed and they go under because they can't maintain revenue, they can't maintain, attendance.
World League of American Football.
The NBA and ESPN have been subsidizing the WNBA for its entire existence. So this is something Whitlock pointed out last week. that I said, "Oh, that's a pretty good point," is that when you listen to these current and former WNBA players talk, one of the reasons they sound so bitchy, frankly, is because they're entitled. They're he called as he called them that I said, oh, I'm not allowed to say that, but I'm quoting Jason Whitlock. I'm not saying they're welfare queens. They're welfare queens because the league is a welfare league. It has been
And they
subsidized
finally
the
get
entire time.
somebody who's filling up stadiums. They're having to get
Mhm.
new stadiums when they go somewhere because the ones they originally were slated on were selling out too fast. And
And
here's
then
the
they
thing.
move, and then those new seats get sold out.
Here's the thing. In 20 years, nobody's going to care about the WNBA again if they don't change their ways.
Mhm.
I put a big if on that. I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but if they don't change their ways. But guess what? Who they're going to remember? Caitlin Clark.
Mhm.
I can think. Name three WNBA players before her. I can name two.
The only name that pops into my head is Cheryl
That's
Swoops.
one of them I could name.
And oh, and then Griner because she's
Griner
awful
because
and
she
she
had
was a
all
moron
of
who got
the other
arrested in
stuff.
Russia.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, I knew her name before that because she was, hate to say it this way. Okay, this is a euphemism, not me making. She's a man amongst boys
Mm.
in what she did. So I mean, when she was at Baylor and she was just crushing people, she was stature wise just incredibly more endowed for basketball than
Mhm.
anybody else she was facing. So I remember those days. But other than that, I can't think of anybody
So
because they don't let people stand out.
you have this entitlement mentality because you're a welfare league and you feel you are owed. On top of that, let's not beat around the bush and remember that most of the league is made up of radical black feminist lesbians. So you add that Marxist ideology on top of it to turn that entitlement up to 11. And then you also have the the bitterness, the anger. I've been watching a lot of people posting clips of, montages of guys you don't this isn't the defense you think it is. This isn't the slam dunk you think it is of the WNBA has always been like this. It's always been a hard league. Um, so what you're saying is it's always been a league populated by angry feminist lesbians who can't control their emotions and lash out and screech and start brawls. I didn't know this. Nobody knew this. But the oh what was the brawl in Detroit called? What was the nickname of that? The
Is that
Malice
the
in the
one?
Palace.
Yeah, that's the one
Yeah,
with Meta World.
Meta World Peace. Yeah, when he
Meta
ran
World
into the
Peace.
stands
Yeah.
and I've read stuff subsequently that he might have been quasi justified in doing it, but or at least in a normal world, like if someone said that to you on the street, yeah, he's them's are fighting words and you're gonna get punched in the face. But that was a huge deal for the NBA that required massive suspensions and fines. And apparently that goes on all the time in the WNBA. So again, back to the system that Clark is trying to fight here and how much of an uphill battle it is, and that it might not be winnable at all. Which, all right, if you want your league to burn, if you want your league to continue to be pointless, fine. I mean, at some point, ESPN is going to have to stop subsidizing them because they're hemorrhaging money. They are they like most of the rest of Disney, like most cable and broadcasting, they're not what they used to be because there are just too many other options. And so they've had to make a lot of cuts the past several years. So at some point, the laws of supply and demand are going to slap them in their face. And then what's the WNBA going to do? They're already on a shoestring budget, or were before Clark came along and they started selling out stadiums.
Mhm.
So, uh, but they don't want to. The
Well, this will at minimum last through Clark's rookie contract because I think she seems like the person that will honor that.
Mhm.
But she's got multi-million dollar offers from I think it's is it Ice Cube and somebody else that has a 3-on-3 league that they do like a kind of like an
Okay.
XFL style thing that is pretty popular in kind of X game style circles. She got those offers before she went to the WNBA, which you know what the base salary for the number one draft pick in the WNBA is?
60 something,
75K.
75. Okay.
75K, so about the same as a first year engineer or something. You know, it's so she's offered multi-million dollar contracts, but she goes to the WNBA out of principle. But how long is that going to last?
Hmm.
Because at some point you start to realize I bring this value and I'm not getting paid to it. This is okay, so this is the difference between Clark and the other people in W. You brought up bitterness and entitlement. They don't understand the concept of I'm bringing this value because they're getting their pay. But she's going to realize I bring this amount of value. So the complaints about like, okay, so uh, the women's soccer league, we had this not that long ago. We need
Oy.
equal pay to the men, right? And the argument against it, which was good, was well, you got to bring equal revenue. So if you take percentage wise what the men get paid versus what they bring
The women
in,
actually get paid more.
the women get paid more.
Hmm.
So that's what distorts it. And that's why the argument never works because everybody, even just slightly inherently, understands that you're not bringing anything to the table. But on the flip side of that, this person is going to realize I'm not just bitching and moaning. I actually do bring more than to the table than they are. And I'm
And one
still
of the
passionate
few
about basketball. And I don't want to just retire and do endorsements, but there's this other league that I could still play basketball.
NIL is a Pandora's box that is probably going to destroy college football, but it's the NCAA's own damn fault because they were so greedy and stupid. But one of the good things that came about it is that someone like Clark knows what she's worth because while she was still at Iowa, she got a shoe deal. She was on a freaking National State Farm
Mm-hmm.
commercial. Okay, national commercials pay well. Okay, um, and reportedly, I think the shoe deal was worth millions. I don't remember what the State Farm deal was worth. I think that was also worth millions. So she knows what she's worth. She knows what she can command in the market. But to
Mm-hmm.
your point, I think she also cares about excellence. And
Well, and
this
there's
is
another
the
part of it
league for
too.
all its faults.
Yeah,
So,
there's another part of it too, because the endorsements are there because of the basketball.
mhm, mhm,
And if she just separates from the crappy basketball league to do the endorsements, that fizzles out too because she's no longer in the basketball.
mhm.
So,
But then to your point, there's another possibility out there that
mhm.
might, do more for her than the WNBA. Especially again, I don't know. So when people who know sport, know basketball better than I do, say the quality of play is kind of crappy in the WNBA, I'll take their word for it. Um, uh, I don't know how many people who are fans because this is something historic and she's so much better than everyone else and that's why they're tuning in. Some of those are going to be actual basketball people who know the game, who like the game, who are going to watch it and go, this is what the WNBA is all about. No wonder no one watches this,
Yeah, okay,
and so
I'll give
there's
you
that element of it as well.
yeah, well the problem is it's just different. And this is why we know it can still work because who's one of the biggest basketball players currently?
On the men's side,
Name the top 5 currently on the men's side, or at least
uh,
in the last 5 years. Last 5 years.
uh, Durant, Curry, LeBron, those names come to mind because I remember uh, a stat that I heard during this NBA playoffs that was the first time in the last, I think it was 20 years, that one of those three wasn't going to be in the second round of the NBA playoffs.
Yeah,
Um,
I wanted you to say it. And you said the right name already in the top 3. Curry.
Curry. Yeah,
So the big thing about the WNBA, they were like, it's not exciting because they can't dunk and blah, blah, blah. The athleticism is different. The game is different. They do have to post
that's a
up
good
and
point.
shoot and pass the ball more and all of these things. Uh,
But
but
that's what the NBA
we
has
know
become.
from we know from recent history that shooting threes is freaking exciting too,
Hmm.
especially if you can do it from 4 yards back from the 3 point line, like
Hmm.
Caitlin Clark can do, like Steph Curry can do, and you do it very well, and you excite the crowd with those. Steve Kerr coaching Steph Curry is probably like, I wish this was as popular back when I played, when I hit five in a row for the Spurs in Game 6
Oh,
against the Pistons.
that was an awesome. That
and
was an awesome
but
game.
yet still, somebody else got the MVP. It's like, but we know that formula can work because Steph Curry can't dunk, not in game format. He might be able to if
Yeah,
he had a
yeah.
perfectly uninhibited run up. So don't prove me wrong with a video there if you even cared about what I said. But he's a layup guy.
Hmm.
Harden was kind of the same. He can dunk, but most of the time he did a layup because he was kind of the borderline. The layup was more effective than the dunk for him, but he was also exciting from the 3 point line. I hated the way he played the refs, but other than that, we know the formula can work if if you have an exciting enough personality doing it.
Yeah.
Or even just the media slightly highlighting this. Look at what this person is doing.
Well, but that's back to the systemic problem is that Clark isn't just fighting against, you know, the women's sports isn't as popular. She's also fighting against all of these other women because, the nail that gets stuck up gets hammered down. That
Mhm.
was there was a lot of infuriating stuff that was talked about in Peterson's interview with Riley Gaines, when it came to her experience with the she-man who was walking around the locker room with a giant, well, not giant, but erection, uh openly watching everybody get undressed and dressed.
She refused to directly answer that question and whether it was giant or not.
The implication was that it was not. Um the the interesting part about it, though, and this segued from the, hey, I don't know if you guys know this, but guys and girls are different. And it's not just the physical. She talked about the mental because she was the team captain. And so she talked about having to uh, learn how to how to deal with other women in a way that was firm and assertive without being uh without being a turn off to the way women work and the way women
Mhm.
think. That and her boyfriend, now I think husband, was on the men's team at Kentucky, and she talked about how it was very different there and that they would practice a lot, and so they were around the men's team, and the men, no duh, very hierarchical.
Mhm.
And the guys that were best were at the top and they ran the team and basically what they said went. And she had to have, we would have to have bonding time. We would have to have, you know, emotional support time. We would have to, all of these things. And what she was saying is what you have said, which is that women are coalitional. She had to keep this coalition
Mhm.
together. And that was a challenge. So it's not a surprise that you have all these angry black feminist lesbians who hate the straight white girl.
Well, tell me, have you heard any of these on a regular level, not an athletic level? And anybody who has listened this long, the skinny girl in the room saying, I'm so fat. It's not just for attention, it's knocking herself down a peg
Mm-hmm.
with self
Mm-hmm.
deprecating talk. So everybody kind of equalizes there. And then everybody comes to her support. No, you're not. I wish I could be as skinny as you. And da 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 da. When to me, it's the rudest thing you could say, but it works for women. But
I
as a
hate my hair.
yeah, as a man, I'm like, you do realize you just insulted everybody in the room if they were men. You know, if a guy walks in with, massive chest and six pack a la Arnold and says, God, my body fat is so high to a bunch of guys with dad bod, they'd be like, yeah,
Shut up.
fuck you, dude. But it knocks them down. Or I talked about if you're allowed to do it if you're competing with men. Anybody ever heard this one? Oh, you're so successful to the woman, and she says, just trying to be a woman in a man's world. We've all heard that one too, because she turned it to not competing with everybody that's talking to her right now, but all the men in her profession. Oh, you're allowed to be successful now because you're doing it in the competition with men. So that's what if Caitlin Clark was in the NBA, she would still be the hot topic.
Mhm.
She still is the hot topic, but she would be like the hotter topic. She would be the hot topic among the people who are talking trash about her now.
Yeah,
Which,
that
because of
is.
her style of play, I actually think she might be competitive. Maybe not in the NBA, but she might have been able to be competitive
Mhm.
in NCAA because she is more of a finesse player.
Yeah. The physical differences would probably make her a bench player, but you know,
She can
she might have could
she
have
can
done
hit
it.
a three as good as any. She could. I mean, look, we'll go back to Steve Kerr. Wasn't the greatest athlete.
Well, but the pace of play is different
Hmm.
because of the strength and lung capacity and blah 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 differences
Hmm.
for the men and women's game. So the pace of play is going to be different. That's why I say probably a bench player. But you know, I of all of the people that
I
I
will
have
say a
ever seen
role
play,
player, whether it's
probably comes
starting or bench,
closest.
because
Yeah, better way to phrase it.
it would
Yeah.
be that if you're open, it's coming to you so you can shoot.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't remember what the 3-point line difference is between, or if there is one between
It
men and
doesn't
women
matter
in
because she shoots them
NCAA.
from almost half court.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
She's shooting from the men's line anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I think we need to move on from that. But yeah, it was something that was bothering me, and then the perfect person that I could put like words out to more than my own reach posted something that I could comment on, and I just thought it would make a good topic. So hopefully everybody agrees. If you do, like, subscribe, and please share us with your friends, especially if you're in sports or athletic circles, because we do talk about that stuff a lot. But now we're going to move on to more depressing things, and you want to talk climate and
well, it connects in my mind because the what Clark is exposing, this is a very Trumpian moment, and for this drives me crazy when his sycophants talk about this because they go overboard of no one else would have done this and this is why he's so awesome. Okay, highlighting a problem is significant, is important, but you also have to do something to try and solve the problem. So the swamp, I hate the term the deep state. The swamp is so fitting, not for DC in particular, but the federal government in general, because it's not just it's not just one thing. Okay, it is, if you've never been in a swamp, what makes it so annoying is that is the fetid water just is everywhere. So you'll think you're about to step on firm ground and your foot will squish, and then a bunch of mosquitoes fly up in your face, right? And it just crawls everywhere, and that is what has been highlighted with the attacks, not just on Trump but on his supporters, which is what's more important. That people, even now, even the people who use the word, I don't think understand just how deep and far it goes. And that's what Caitlin Clark is illustrating, is that this isn't something that can be fixed easily. This is some, or at least not simply.
this isn't some rival that has a beef with her.
Yes. Yes.
This is a systemic problem. Yeah.
Yeah. There is the Angel Reese girl who keeps trying to make it about her, but it's not just about her. It's not about this beef from last year's NCAA championship or anything like that. No, no. She is getting mauled by everyone in the league, and every commentator, at least the female commentators, are ripping
You
into
you
her.
just named a third WNBA player, by the way.
Oh, hey, yeah,
Yeah,
that one.
Angel Reese.
Go me.
But nobody knows who she is if not for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's this issue, because you brought this up, and I want to go actually pull up the law and dig into it, which I hadn't done. And I know you have it, but I want to take the time to dig into it and talk about it more. Right now I just want to talk about one of the effects of it, okay? Because you brought up the environmental element of it, and you mentioned the example being your gas guzzling truck.
Hmm.
And this is what I mean by the swamp goes so far, and people just don't understand how difficult it will actually be to unravel some of what is frankly pure fascism. It is corporate government collusion. That is fascism. That is what the economy of fascism is. That is how it is different. That is how that brand of socialism, that's what it is a brand
Hmm.
of socialism, is different from the communist brand of socialism. That is how they implement their socialist ideals on the economy, is rather than taking over an industry, rather than nationalizing an industry, rather than having some sort of board like the Soviet Union did. They just say, well,
We'll just work together really well and tell the people that we're separate.
mm,
Yeah.
so you guys are our, you know, Daimler Benz and Mercedes. You're our automobile industry. You do what we want, you do what we say, and we'll make sure that you are not interfered with.
Mhm.
We'll make sure that no upstart comes along to unseat you, like what happened in America. We have the big three, but like just take GM, General Motors. Look at how many brands are under General Motors. That's because there were a ton of car companies that got cropping up early in the American auto industry. And something would be hot, like the freaking Studebaker, you know? Someone would be hot, and then someone else would come along with a better way of doing it, and they would unseat that company. And then they would rise, and they would merge, and they would fall, and all this happened. And that was one of the early things to come along that the government did, and that's one of the reasons Japan was able to come along and kick our butts in the 70s, is we want to normalize, rationalize the industry. And that was one of the first heavily government influenced industries, and it shows. So what you specifically brought up was the what was it called,
Invention Secrecy
the
Act
Invention Secrecy Act. And
of 1951.
I'm not going to play any of this video, but if you want to go down a rabbit hole, here is an hour-long video you can go watch on the Y files from a month ago. So you don't have to scroll down that far. Killer patents and secret science. Okay. Free energy and anti-gravity cover-ups. And the
It's the
uh
theory. It's the hypothesis why Tesla was supposedly
exactly.
died early in his
He
life.
actually starts the video with Tesla. Okay. And then they go into, you brought up the truck, and that's what made me think of this, is they go into a number of people who claimed, and some of them, this was done with like video evidence. There are like 60 Minutes or other news magazine stories on these people who claimed, I was able to get 200 miles a gallon by doing this, and then the patent was either sold or seized.
Hmm.
The dark trip, and not that long ago, I would have rolled my eyes and said, you know, our government and our industry aren't going around assassinating people. I'm not so sure anymore, because they go through the long list, and it is even longer than this. It was just they only went through about a dozen of someone who claimed to have cracked the code on fusion or something similar, some other very new, potentially cheaper, better source of energy, and the person died under strange circumstances. And the patent was seized under this law. Well, where am I going with this and the chicken conspiracy? Okay, this is the Fat Files. This is the fat electrician who mostly does, history content, but then he's got this smaller second channel where he goes on these kind of deep dives on random things. Like he did an episode on why he loves Aldi so much as kind of a test case for how you do business, like just looking at their business model. All right, how does this fit into it? And as you see from the title, his rant here is basically how much he wants a Toyota Hilux and how he can't get it. And yes, supposedly, technically, the Hilux is some people say, well, it's just the Tacoma. No, it's not. There's another one some people claim it is. It's not the same thing. The reason you can't get a Toyota Hilux or a number of other, and not just that, but when I worked at the pipe yard, um, he had these cheap Toyota or Mazda, no frills, no power, anything, which is loads of fun when you're carrying around a giant load of oil pump supplies and you have no power steering. That's loads of fun. Um, but he would get these really cheap, no frills, small trucks. You can't get those anymore. I see all these memes making fun of, oh, the overcompensating guy with the big truck. They're all big trucks. Why? He Fat Electrician goes into it in this episode of the Fat Files. This is what I mean by the depth and breadth of the swamp, because the way the category is configured is that it is a ratio of the interior to either the exterior or the bed. So if you keep making the interior bigger, then it is no longer a light utility vehicle. It is no longer subject to the same regulations. It is no longer subject to the same tariffs. That is a main reason trucks keep getting bigger and bigger, because they keep making the interior bigger, which means they have to make the whole truck bigger.
Yeah, we call the back seat of my truck Hotel Crew Max.
It is a. I remember when a four-door truck was a freaking luxury, and now that's pretty much standard. We got to ride around in the little flip seats in the back, and it
I
used
had to ride in the bed. What the fuck, dude?
well, it used to be that you had those little flip seats in the back, and for no one who doesn't remember, there was like this much space behind the cab, behind the main seats, and there would be this little seat that would flip up into the side of the truck and it would flip down, and you put on this crappy seatbelt that wasn't going to do anything. And the reason for that useless seat was because then it wasn't a light utility vehicle. So this swamp, you've got, on the one hand, you've got the Invention Secrecy Act, where the government can seize a patent and lock it away if it deems it to be a threat to national security. And the way it is often used is, well, technically, it would really undermine the security of the United States if our oil industry cratered, because it's such a huge component of our economy. So that's a threat to national security.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon here. So you have that. And then on top of that, you have all these regulations that work as subsidies. Because if you've probably encountered this, because I'm guessing the rules and regulations for you running a business out of your home are different from when you had the gym.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I mean, I
I
can't even
remember
I can't even call it a gym.
I remember when you were putting in, like, you were putting in a bathroom, and there were like all these hoops you had to go through. You couldn't, like, you and me could make a bathroom. We have done enough general work that if it could be, let's throw a bathroom in there. That's not doable. You
Mm-hmm.
had to get a contractor, and it had to meet all these specifications.
Yeah, it had to fit the city inspector, you had to get the fire marshal out again, you had to drop a sprinkler head in there because it's separated from everything else, all of those things. Yeah, that I had to do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Subsidies or regulation is a subsidy to big business because they can much more easily absorb dealing with that. You don't have a uh, a legal department to help you navigate all of this stuff. You don't have your own health and safety department to make sure you're in compliance with us all stuff. It's just you. So any business, and something like 80% of business in America is small business, meaning less than 100 employees, you can only do so much. You can only grow so big because that middle sector there, you're making you're big enough that now you have all these extra regulations that you have to comply with, but you're not big enough to be able to afford to comply with them.
Well, there's workarounds. Like fire marshal got a lot easier after I started training the fire chief. That was one step that helped me out. But no, you're absolutely right. No, there were so many anybody in the audience, if you run a small business, disagree or agree with me, those hoops and all the little nickel and diming along the way is the biggest hurdle. Taxes and regulations are the biggest hurdle. Marketing, uh, doing a good job, having a great product, that's the easy part. The problem is you need to do those exceptionally better to make up for the other, because that's your only way of fighting, is to
Mm-hmm.
just be successful enough that you overcome the hill that's in front of you. So you take some Jack 3D and chug it down with a rock star and try to sprint over that hill and hope you don't have a heart attack in the process. It's that's
Yeah.
just the way it is. And
All right.
unfortunately, I had a heart attack in the process.
So let me try and connect the dots in my brain that's swimming in my brain fluid at this point is pretty much just all vodka, and I've had like 8 concussions. So let me see if I can tie all this together. So,
If you
something
need
I
a second to
teased.
think about it, I got something nice to say about Aldi. But
Oh, go ahead.
okay, so you brought up Aldi. So speaking of saving money and stuff, uh, there's a thing called cold dinner in Europe. You have hot lunch, cold dinner. We call it here charcuterie board because that then you can charge like 80% more for it if you call it something fancy. Aldi, if you go there, you can have a 6-person get together, wine and everything you would have on a 6-person charcuterie board for like $30. So just get the ingredients separate. Aldi's the place to go because you will pay maybe a third to a quarter for their fancy cheeses and stuff than you will at
Yeah.
like HEB or something. So
Yeah.
there's my plug. You feel free to sponsor us, Aldi.
Well,
Uh,
that's a good
I
segue
can be
into.
paid in brie, by the way, or Camembert. Those are my two favorite.
I didn't know their backstory until I watched the Fat Files video on it. What's so incredible about Aldi is that they got their start in post-war Berlin. There was no anything in post-war Germany, and these two brothers decide, hey, we should start a grocery store. With what? Well, they managed to make it so successful because they absolutely epitomize keep it simple, stupid.
Hmm.
That is their entire business model is keep it simple,
And
stupid.
have one person to stock and check the entire day, and you don't have to pay anybody else. That's the only bad thing about Aldi is people will go there because of the prices and stuff, and they will have this basket just full of random things, 5 people deep in the line with one checker the whole time. So it's that's the only annoying part. I
Yeah.
try to I try to time my visits to a play time when it's not popular, and even still I get stuck behind that one person with everything in their cart. And every once in a while you get somebody nice. It's like, oh, you're only holding 3 things of coffee. Why don't you go in front of me? Because you're going to be quick. Yeah,
Every once in a while.
every
So
once in a while.
the the reason I teased environmentalism last time is because If you are a true environmentalist and you actually care about the environment, then you should be a disciple of Milton Friedman, because the buzzword for the last 10, 15 years with environmentalism is sustainability. By definition, if you have to subsidize something, it's not sustainable. It can't stand on its own 2 feet. It's not supportable. Case in point, we've ranted about electric vehicles. Those batteries are ludicrously expensive and messy. First to get the raw materials, then to ship them where they need to go, then to make them. It, yes, exactly. It's almost like climate change isn't actually what you care about.
Yeah.
So if I don't remember if I've said this before on here, but I've said it to my kids that I'm actually meant to grab it. Oh well, it's too late. I've gone too far. Thomas Sowell's Basic Economics. Chapter 1 is titled Prices, which seems dumb, but no, I want to know the fancy stuff. Tell me the fancy stuff, Professor Sowell, with your smartness. Okay, well then he made me feel dumb, because the reason prices are the first chapter is because he says, paraphrasing him, the important thing to you need to realize about prices that normal consumers don't understand, because all we think about is the end product, the end number. So for us, that's just how much I have to shell out to get that thing I want. That's not what a price is. A price is information, because a price is telling the market, oh, that thing, there's a shortage there. So it would behoove me to invest in that. It would behoove me to increase my output of, you know, widgets, because there's a shortage of what's its, and that's a component there. If you are subsidizing, you are interfering with that flow of information. You are distorting that flow of information. So if you want something that is sustainable, if you want to maximize the use of resources, then you want to get rid of subsidies. You lefty environmentalists out there who are calling for an end to all oil subsidies, I am totally with you if we do it with everything else. And there is precedence for this on an environmental level. So for instance, cotton used to be a big agribusiness in California. It was not a good place for it because cotton needs lots of water. And where it was being grown in California, they had to irrigate a lot. And this was even before the big droughts. So luckily, that was expensive. They were able to do it because they were being subsidized. India sued America in the World Trade Organization, I think, and it was upheld that, yeah, you are violating these trade agreements by subsidizing this. So the cotton subsidies went away. They said, well, what can we do with this land that we don't need to irrigate as much and grows well here? That was when the California wine industry boomed, because a lot of those cotton growers switched to grapes.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when you started to see this. There was obviously there was already a California wine industry, but a major reason there was a huge boom in it starting in the 80s and into the 90s is because they stopped taking the free rent, which was the subsidy to grow cotton and the subsidy that was necessary to irrigate it.
On the flip side of that, the definitionally between capitalism and crony capitalism, let's look at the sugar industry.
Mm-hmm.
The sugar industry was struggling because they could not compete with like Dominican and the Caribbean areas, part of the Yucatan, all of those areas in growing sugar cane. And they couldn't compete there. in the market, and that should have been that true capitalism. It would have been these other places are doing it better.
Hmm.
Therefore, uh, they went out. That would have been true capitalism. Okay, you talk about a little bit of nationalism. Okay, we put this tariff to help our sugar industry. That would have been a little bit of government influence helping your own industry. But what did we get? We got tariffs to help the corn industry because that's when we introduced high fructose corn syrup. Because we had all of this corn that was being subsidized by the government and we needed to do something with it. And oh my gosh, we can create this product that if we put a tariff on imported sugar, we can actually make a profit. And so the government was subsidizing the corn, was needing a use for this corn to profit off of it to actually justify the subsidization. And so they had to put a tariff on imported sugar. So the high fructose corn syrup became the main thing. And look at what happened to the nation. We're
Hmm.
fat and obese, and our livers are dying. And you know what? High fructose corn syrup is worse for your liver than alcohol. There you go. If you drink full sugar Cokes, all right?
All right. So when I brought up the subsidies and environmentalism, it brought to mind. Now, some of you, if you're a nerd like me and you pay attention to this stuff, you might assume I was going to Solyndra because that's the big name. Because I'm a giant dork, I remembered something from over a decade ago about Spain, and I went to find the information on Spain and to illustrate my point about subsidies and about what it does to the economy as well as the environment. And then I found this and thought, oh, geez, they're doing it again or still, because this is from 2022, that Spain has funneled millions, if not billions, by this point of subsidies into their green industry, their green energy industry. And what it is doing is pricing the poor out of the market because energy costs are skyrocketing in Spain and have been for years. So you've got affluent Madrid's suburbs that are able, those homeowners are able to afford to put up all the solar panels, and then they get a kickback from the government, but the grid isn't producing as much as it was. So now, for people who don't get those subsidies and don't have those solar panels, their kilowatt hour cost has skyrocketed. Okay. And I was going all the way back to 2010 originally, and then I found, oh, good, you're still doing it or doing it again. But the stat I remembered that I went looking for, and again, this is all the way from back in 2010. Okay. Uh, for every one green job financed by Spanish taxpayers, 2.2 real jobs were lost as an opportunity cost. 9 out of 10 green jobs created by Spain over the past 10 years are no longer in existence today. So they started this big green energy program in 2000. There was this temporary boost because of this subsidy. And then almost all the jobs went away. Plus, you lost a bunch of other jobs in the process. And on top of that, you destroyed a bunch of regular jobs and your uh, energy costs skyrocketed. So this was from 2014. Uh, and here it is. So electricity prices in Spain in 2011 were nearly 2.5 times more than that of the US after all of this work. Oh, and their CO2 emissions increased by 34.5%. All of that work to lose jobs, squeeze the lower working class people because they, by definition, people on the lower income scale are squeezed harder when you inflate prices because they have less disposable income. So there's less wiggle room. They can't absorb those costs. And you can click through these studies to see to those were just basically the summaries, and those two studies are available. You can go through the whole thing and they will tell you how they calculated all of that, and they used multiple metrics. But the main reason I used these guys' studies is because both of these studies use the best case scenario. They use the government's own numbers and calculate it in a couple of different ways, giving the benefit of the doubt. And if they had to estimate, they they put the estimate on the green side. They gave it the benefit of the doubt, essentially. So in other words, it's probably even worse than this.
Think
So
I'm trying to think. I think don't quote me on this, but I think I'm quoting Bjorn Longberg when he said something, or I guess paraphrasing, something to the extent of all of these measures. Okay, so the argument isn't if all of these measures are justified from a technical standpoint. The question is, are they justified from a results standpoint?
mhm.
And if you do all of these things to make things better, but the end result is things are actually worse, that's my number one metric of judging whether it was a good plan. And that's what we're getting right now. Like you said, we did all of these things. Maybe uh, prospectively, we had a model, which you know my opinion on models.
Mhm.
We had a model that said this was going to be great, but now we've got real world data that the model was wrong.
Decades of real world data at this
Decades of
point.
real world data that the model was wrong. Don't give me a new model with the same assumptions.
Mhm.
Give me a new model that changes it. And we don't know if it's going to be right or wrong. But give me a model that changes things from your original model. Don't just say keep doing the old model, it'll work out at some point. Yeah, keep charging up that credit card. That's going to
Mhm.
improve your life in the long run, you know.
Yeah. So whether you are on the whether you are motivated by the fact that way too much of our dollars, our tax dollars, go to big corporations who don't need it and generally screw us over, or you're motivated by sustainability and what the best, most efficient way to use our resources are, um, or you're motivated by the end result, as you say, or you're just a dollars and cents person looking at the economics of it, going, "Well, this doesn't make any sense." You know, we're going to spend all this money to have a net loss of jobs, a net increase in our our energy prices. Why? The point should be we need to start rolling back subsidies across the board. But we can't, we won't, because the swamp is so deep and broad.
Well, because they get kickbacks from the same industry that they're subsidizing.
And this, what started us down this rabbit hole was, when was that act? 1951.
1951, yeah.
1951 and 1958 would have been Eisenhower's farewell address, when he warns about the military industrial complex. And one of the things that is, oh, people remember the phrase, but they don't actually go and watch or read the speech, because one of the things he points out in that speech, part of that complex, part of that the industry part of that, includes academia, includes the scientific research community,
Mm-hmm.
which are being incentivized to feed into this to get the free money, because yes, I mean, this is a freaking five-star general. Yes, we need a much more robust national defense system than we ever have as a nation, because we had never had a large standing force until after World War One. We would fight a war, we would draw down, and then we would have a very small standing army to deal with hotspots. Because of the USSR, we couldn't do that anymore. So, on the one hand, yes, we need this. On the other hand, we are creating an incentive structure that is going to screw over the American people and
I've got
benefit a very small few.
I've got a sports example for that. Incentives and how things are being done and research. Because we were talking about this in one of my first groups this morning because of a certain Texans player that didn't get re-signed because of stupid things he did. Uh, but the response to that was from one of the other people's, oh, they need to do these programs for these young people who are going into these major league sports that are all of a sudden rich on how you conduct yourself and how you finance handle your finances and
Mm-hmm.
how you don't ruin your life with your early success kind of thing. And it just popped in my head. I said, there's a good reason why they don't. Because all of these things that happen to these guys later in life, they blame on one thing: CTE, the concussions and the head injuries and stuff. They blame it all on that. If they did an intervention early that would solve all those things, they would no longer have this boogeyman to use. And the Players Association, that is their biggest weapon. The Players Union, that is their
Mm-hmm.
biggest weapon they use every time they're trying to negotiate better things for themselves, which they say are better things for the players. But the actual better thing for the player would be this early education.
Mm-hmm.
But the only research being done on CTE is the negative impacts. And you would muddy that up if you included a variable that might fix a lot of those end result problems. Because yes, let's be honest. If you are in a contact sport, boxing, football, American football, anything where you have chances of getting hit in the head a lot, there will be changes to your brain over time. The question is, what is the degree of that change and how does it affect your life? They don't
Mm-hmm.
want to answer that other part because then they could always speculate that it is the problem. And it is their number one bargaining chip. So they don't do any research that challenges those end results. They only do the research that says this is happening. Yes, of course it's happening. I can tell you that. I mean, no, we did a whole CTE episode, but I'll piggyback that with no reasonable person will say that, oh, if you get hit in the head a lot, it's not going to have any effect on your brain. But again, what's the degree and how and why and what are other interventions that might be affecting what might be covariance to those endpoints? It's it's an ostrich syndrome. You're putting your head in the sand, and that parallels with what you're talking about because they control what's research is being done because you have to get funding for this. Lots of funding for brain scans on suicidal former NFL players. There's no funding on how could we have early interventions on their later life behavior that might help with this. How do you not get addicted to painkillers? That's a big one in the NFL. How do you not get shot in a club because you're making it rain with your homeboys and somebody gets in a fight? How do you save money in case you get injured 3 years from now? All of these other interventions that might be important. They don't do anything. They have a couple old guys from the NFL come in and say, well, do better than I did. And that's it. That's pretty much their intervention.
Get a prenup so the gold digger don't steal your money. Okay, well that's not entirely helpful. That's focusing on one
Well,
thing there.
this might get us canceled, but like I tell my younger but adult enough to have this talk with athletes, don't trust pullout and don't believe they're on birth control when they tell you. I mean, it's solid.
Yeah.
That's solid advice, but they still do it, and I've lost a couple careers to that early baby mama. So, because it messes you up. you would think it would inspire you to work harder, but usually
Hmm.
that same person tries to suck you away from it and then gets pissed when you are sucked away from it and leaves you because you're no longer the baseball player or the football player or the basketball player. It's it's a vicious cycle.
It's almost like
Differences
men and
between
women
people.
are different.
Almost like. And it's almost like they have tendencies. And if you're aware of these tendencies, you can prevent the bad outcome.
Hmm. This is I wore my I miss Abe shirt
Well, this
because
is why you talk to the old man because you're always older than you've ever been. So you don't know how to act your age.
mm-hmm.
And these guys are 20, 21 years old. It, it, it's it's almost guaranteed if a girl's willing, you're willing. It,
Oh yeah, that's if I think we've talked about this before, but I shake my head desk when I hear about these, you know, couples going through a rough patch because the intimacy's not there anymore. Hey, honey, guess what? Tell your man you want to have more sex, and you know what the answer is going to be? Okay, yes, please.
the only rebuttal I would have to that is a lot of guys self-sabotage that by a lot of behaviors that really make it to where she wants to not. And in a way that is the better result is the fight than just doing it.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, that's where the okay, how do we make that happen? What do you need from me? What do you need from me? What do you need from me? Okay, let's work together to make sure that happens so that we don't get in this stereotypical married couple rut.
if it was that easy, it would be easy to be a marriage counselor. Because most times people don't know what I need from you and you need and
That's a good point.
yeah. Because there's things you think you know. You're like, if they'd only do the dishes more,
Hmm.
that if my husband would only do the dishes more, but then husband does the dishes every night and you're like, God, why is he such a simp? Because that's not what you needed from him. You
Hmm.
needed support. It wasn't about the dishes.
Hmm.
That
Hmm.
might have initially worked because it was an act, but when all the other things that were unsupportive are still there, you're still in that space. So some of these temporary fixes is you think you need this thing, but there's an underlying issue that you that is just manifested in that thing you think you need. And so that's the exploration. And the sad thing is, and this is actually why I'm thinking of actually going kind of into marriage counseling when when I finish this process, is because it's got a 95% failure rate.
Oh wow.
And there might be reasons for that because it might be approached incorrectly. And a lot of marriage counselors talk about it that it's because they're already too far before they go there. But the approach I've been thinking of is we're completely off topic. Did you want to wrap that up before I go into
No,
this?
no, keep going.
Okay, the approach I was thinking is actually a marriage counselor that actually looks at the two people and says, you know what? There's a 95% chance that I'm going to fail with you two. So I'm here for the kids. And I need y'all to be a certain way so they don't grow up fucked up. And I actually think that would increase the success rate because what brings two people together other than doing something together? And what better doing something together is actually raising your children together.
Hmm.
That might be the most powerful because the sex is great, but I mean, to a guy, sex is like pizza. Bad sex is good sex. You
Hmm.
know, it's the sex is great, but that wears off. The we just bought this new home is great. The dual incomes and stuff is great, but that wears off if you're successful, or if you're not successful, it wears off faster because you're like, I can do better. You know, all of those things are just feelings in the moment. But raising kids together is like the ultimate activity, and it is the actual purpose of humans pair bonding. Because why would we pair bond if it wasn't important to raise a child together? there's actually no other reason, because you could get everything else we talk about: support, financial stuff, sex, uh, emotional bonding. You could get all of that with anybody else you click with, but you can't raise the same kid you made together with anybody else you click with.
No, that's a good point, and shines a light on the growing epidemic of the rising numbers of young people who not only have not had sex or aren't having sex, but aren't even interested. Why bother? I got, I got the internet, which is full of boobs, and, you know, a big monitor here, and then I don't have to, okay, sure, maybe it's not the same thing, but it's good enough, and I don't have to deal with all the baggage. So it's
There was a
so
good Saturday Night Live bit that Peyton Manning did that actually illustrates something that's a real phenomenon. The bit was he was taking his kid to the park, and when all the other mommies would start flirting with him, he's like, "Oh, it's so sad when his mom died." You know, because what's more attractive to a mother than a father being a father?
mm,
Sexy daddy. I've heard that term
mhm.
amongst the ladies I train, sexy daddy. And yeah, so if you take a couple that has children and all of a sudden mom is being maternal and dad is being a good dad, mom's probably going to be attracted to dad again. And when mom's attracted to dad again, she's going to be turned on enough that she's going to say the words that makes every guy say yes. Let's do it. Those are the words, you know? So, and if he's more attracted to her because of her motherly, influence over the child, you could bring people back together because you're going to reignite the original reason why they were together, which is, I want to have sex with you to have a baby. It's abstracted in today's society because we have birth control and culture things, but the underlying thing is not the problem, not the other things that are fighting about on top. He comes home and doesn't talk and blah, 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 blah. Well, he comes home and doesn't talk because you're not very nurturing as a wife. Oh, well, she just never in the mood. And it's like, well, yeah, she's never in the mood because you're just unsupportive as a husband and you're
Mhm.
basically a shit dad right now. That's so it's both ways. And I think just encouraging them to focus on the child actually would bring out the characteristics that would keep the marriage together in the first place. So that's my thought on that.
So wrapping up my thoughts here, and this
Okay.
that actually connects to what I've been ranting about here.
Well,
Uh,
everything connects.
exactly.
Yeah.
But that's what we tried to do is all right, well, here's a thing. What is actually the root of that thing, not the surface level effects, right? So the surface level uh effects of um what's happening with Caitlin Clark is, you know, angry feminist lesbians who hate the straight white girl. Okay, yes, but why? There's socialism conditioning there, and then there's also, as you
Well,
pointed
they
out, the
they played by the rules of don't stand out, and now all of a sudden someone's
mhm.
standing out, and they're like, "Why not me?" But I can't. And
There's also some female psychology biology in there as well. So there's a lot going on that is creating this effect. Well, why can't we ever get the swamp unswampy? Because we're selfish bastards. And I mean us. I mean
mhm.
you, me, everyone. So, as an example from the right, the oh crap, what was
And
his
just
name?
just if anybody got insulted by that statement, this isn't just playing nice. We are all selfish bastards. Some of us try not to be, but we can't
Hmm.
help it. We just have blind spots in that process.
So from the right, so like Steve Forbes has been trying for 40 years to get a fair tax or a flat tax. And one of the selling points was we're going to simplify the tax code and get rid of the subsidies. Yeah, yeah. You know, you know, John Bon Jovi doesn't need a subsidy because he's technically a farmer. You know, that thing. Yeah, yeah, I'm all for that. Okay. Wait, why are you getting rid of my why are you getting rid of my mortgage interest deduction? Because we're getting rid of all the subsidies. Yeah, but that's mine and it's important.
Hmm.
All right. So what I was looking for was a quote that I know isn't Alexis de Tocqueville, but it's almost always attributed to him. The sentiment is there in Democracy in America, his book, but he didn't actually say this, which is that the American Republic will endure until Congress realizes it can bribe the public with the public's own money. And there you have it.
Hmm.
When you start to see the decline of American liberalism, American constitutional ideology, is in the late 1800s when the progressive movement starts and the federal government starts to get bigger and bigger, slowly at first, but then there's a blip in World War One, and then it comes back down with Harding and Coolidge, and then Hoover and the Great Depression hit, and it goes bazoink and just skyrockets up and never comes back down. And that is where we're at, is that yes, the great majority of people will hear what we've been ranting about here with the subsidies to big businesses and rich people and say that's not right. But then we're bribed with our own money to not put up too much of a fight,
Hmm. I think,
because
yeah,
there's that thing that I like, that I get, that I want.
uh, this is, it makes me think of Dave Chappelle's opening monologue on Saturday Night Live when he was talking about the Orange Man and his debate
Mhm.
with Hillary. He you know, he was like, this is the part that the left doesn't understand, and why he won and why he's
Yeah.
going to do well again is he was up there and someone asked him about all these tax write-offs and breaks and loopholes, and he said, "Of course I do, because I'm smart."
Mhm.
And the reason it won't change if she's in power is because she uses it too.
All our
At
pals
least I'm
use it.
honest about it.
Hmm.
Yeah. And it's like,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
we all do. I've gotten pretty damn good at write-offs over the last several years because that you have to.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're losing, you know, it being good at write-offs, honestly, by the way, even honestly, is the difference between paying 50, 60% of your income to paying 30 to 40% of your income. That's a big difference.
Yep. I've mentioned this before, but one of the more eye-opening things in Frederick Douglass's biography, is his first one, is he talks about, and this was new to me until I'd read Douglass's biography because I'd never seen this mentioned in any history book before, is that there was this tradition in the South around Christmas and New Year's where you would give your slaves 2 weeks off. Not only would you give your slaves 2 weeks off of work in the middle of winter to have this celebratory time, but the good master would provide you with much better food than you would normally have, and more importantly, whiskey.
Mm,
And he would encourage his slaves into revelry and even debauchery, which, you know, Douglas points out, oh, the good Southern Christian gentleman who is encouraging this hedonistic behavior because it benefits him. But his
well, Mardi Gras
critique,
is before Ash Wednesday, you know.
yeah, his critique of the system, if you are able to think beyond that first tier, and if you have some empathy and some self criticism, is what is a gut punch, is when he points out that it was shocking to him to realize that this element of control was one of the reasons it was so hard to find compatriots to escape with him and to help him escape,
Hmm.
because you would work 50 weeks under the lash, but you would get that 2 weeks of freedom, and that would entrap you. And I when I first read that, I went, oof, that is an indictment on the human condition, because that's not the only place in time that has ever happened. Bread and circuses have been around for about as long as humans have been around. It has just changed its shape and its flavor. And so if you actually want to do something about the swamp, whether that's the federal swamp or its tendrils in your local area, then you're going to have to start with, what are my sacred cows? What are my shibboleths that I need to give up? What are the things that I cling to that are inhibiting actual results rather than the token, bill that doesn't solve the problem and usually makes it worse or creates another problem? Because we're not actually going to be able to roll back the swamp until we start rolling back what is feeding the swamp. And that goes not just with the federal Leviathan, but that's endemic of now the federal Leviathan feeds into things like the swamp that is our healthcare system, the swamp that is our school system. Hell, the swamp that is in our entertainment industry. We started this off talking about Caitlin Clark
Hmm.
and the subsidized WNBA, and why it is such a swamp, why it is going to be so difficult to unravel that, even with this giant spotlight that she's shining on it, is because there are way too many people that have both an ideological and an economic investment in keeping things the way they are.
Or the majority of the people involved don't have the talent to benefit from the new dynamic. No, I mean, that's the truth. But that's the truth in all sports. That's the truth in all industries. That's why communism is so popular, or socialism is so popular, because
Mm.
the truth of the matter is most things follow a Pareto distribution. And if they embraced the Caitlin Clark era, then, maybe this former LSU girl would be in there. Maybe, I don't know any other people in the WNBA would be, but, a certain percentage of them would take the center spotlight, and the rest would be nobody. They would just be the supporting cast that could have the blank, face on that that nobody remembers. And so 80% in a voting situation always beats 20. In a talent situation, the 20% always wins. Uh, in men's sports, we embrace that because they realize that that's how you make money.
And because it feeds into the male psyche anyway.
Mm-hmm. But also what it does is it elevates talent. People forget that part
Yeah.
because it always encourages people to try to be in the 20%. So, and a lot of people don't have the talent or even the drive to do that, but it will self-select for the people who do. And that's what the WNBA doesn't get. We talked about everybody says, "Oh, the reason the WNBA is not," so this might be part of it. The isn't more successful is because the talent is bad. Well, maybe the talent is bad because you don't give them incentive to be talented.
Yeah.
Nobody's taking it to the next level because if they take it to the next level, they stand out and everybody brings them down. Just my thoughts. Controversial, I know, but
Yeah. Yeah.
sucks
But
to drink and know things. That's
accurate and applicable to other industries and areas as well. Well, that's enough yelling at clouds from old men. We will see y'all Friday for hopefully more fun, although
it.
it's still kind of a crappy time in Towers of Midnight because we just lost the bestest boy, and
Mhm.
there's still the fallout from that to talk about. Uh, and I don't remember what happens after that. So I'm trying to remember what happens in these last few chapters, but we'll get there when we get there, and we will hopefully have some fun with it.
All right. Any closing statements? I think we hit it all. plus some
Nope.
tangents.
Plus some tangents. There will always be tangents.
Yeah, that was not official marital advice. Not licensed by the state yet, so that was just talking out loud and for educational purposes only. Other than that, I don't think we need any disclaimers.
Yep.
All right, bye.